recently I had cause to go back through the photo archive, if you like, and look for some specific pictures I'd taken a while ago, years ago. And in doing so, I had to go through my Sigma raw files, and I just keep them. I don't keep them on the PC anymore. I keep them on an archive file. But it was really interesting in that going through these Sigma files, I was impressed with just how good the images were. Not from a photographic perspective, but from a from a colours perspective, for the colour pictures. And there's something about that Foveon sensor that it's not easy to explain, but it has its own look to the images. So what I thought I'd do, because I was impressed with some of the rendering of those images, I thought I'd put together a sequence of videos talking about the Sigma cameras that I'd used. Ironically, I don't have a Sigma camera at the moment, even though I love the images from the Foveon sensor. And you can read all about the Foveon sensor, and it's layered, it's 3 layers and all that sort of stuff compared to the Bayer sensor. You can read all about that stuff online, so I won't go into any of that. What I will do is I'll flash up some photographs as I go through, so that you can just see some of the images, and I'll just talk in the background if you like. So I guess the journey for me started in 2009, when at that time I had a Nikon D300 that I was using for most sort of serious photography. And of course the D300, I think it's a cracking camera, brilliant image quality, technically just a very good, serious amateur piece of kit. But it's big and it's heavy. It's bulky and it's heavy for me anyway. I'm a small person. It's a big camera for me. And I was looking for something that provided good image quality, but was pocketable. And at the time, the Sigma DP1 looked like the obvious choice to me. And I think I picked up the camera from a French supplier called Pixmania, I think they were called, and they just did discount cameras and lenses really. And of course, back in those days, there was no customs charges to pay and things like that, when we were all part of the same trading community. So I picked it up at a good price, picked up a new one at a good price from Pixmania, and away we went. And at the time I was working in London, in central London, so I had the opportunity just to have this camera in my pocket going to and from the office and things like that, and sometimes going out at lunch times or whatever, just having a wander around and doing some photography in London. Quite a lot of what I did was what I call kind of night photography, but it's kind of dusk photography, after work. So I managed to get some of that in. And at the time I was processing the photographs in Sigma Photo Pro, older version at that point. And that was okay, but it's it's a little bit of a quirky tool. It's quite a powerful tool certainly in the versions from more recent years. It's quite a powerful tool, but it's a little bit quirky in the way it works. But it does the job, and I was quite happy with it at the time, with the DP1 images. And this camera, the first DP1 I had, travelled obviously to and from work with me. It travelled around Europe on holidays, travelled to Hong Kong on holiday, and Japan. And it took its last picture in Wales on the Pembrokeshire coast, and at that point it had taken 1,127 shots, and I wasn't best pleased with the fact that it died at that point. And the way in which it died was, I switched it on, and the lens protruded, as it does. The lens came out from the body and the camera went shut down with the lens sticking out of the body. And at that point I couldn't retract the lens, it wouldn't go back in, couldn't switch the camera on. That was it, it was finished. I did have a look at attempting a repair on it. I took looked at some stuff online about how to repair them. I took the case off of the camera, and a small bolt fell out, which I didn't think was great. I found where the little bolt went, put it back in, put the camera back together, still no joy. And apparently one of the weaknesses with that particular model is that when the lens protrudes, moves backwards and forwards, the ribbon cable that's attached can fracture, break. I looked at how difficult that was to repair and decided I couldn't do it. So I actually sold that camera as a broken thing, and it went to Greece. I think somebody there, a camera repairer, bought it. So I sold it at for reasonable money. I think it was about £60 or something like that, and it went to Greece. And hopefully it was repaired, because there's no doubt about it, I thought that was a great camera. One of the interesting things was that I mentioned the camera, the lens protruding, and one of the things I loved about that camera was the noise it made. Here's a Ricoh GR with the lens, opening and closing. It's not the same. For some reason, the Sigma DP1 made a noise that went sort of kind of like, ugh, and that was a really good impression, I'm telling you. So, and I got really attached to that noise. It's the best sounding camera for when you switch it on and switched it off that I've ever heard. I thought it was really good. It really sounded like it was working up to something special. And of course it was working up to taking an image. So that was something I really liked about the camera, and I've always missed that since I didn't have since the camera gave up and broke. And it wasn't always, that camera, DP1, it's not all good news, to be quite honest. There's a few things that were a challenge, one of which was battery life. The battery life on the camera, I soon learnt, was pretty poor. I got caught out on a number of occasions early on. I wasn't expecting the battery life to be as poor as it was, but it's a shame when you get to a location. I remember being in Oxford one day for work, beautiful sunny day, got the camera out of my pocket, went to switch it on, nothing, just completely dead. And not only was battery life a bit of an issue, but the on-off button for that camera is mounted on the top plate, and it can be accidentally knocked in your pocket, and I think that's that potentially was a problem as well. Another issue that I think everyone seems to comment on who has these cameras is that they're very slow to use. It's the autofocus is slow, although I found it generally reasonably reliable focusing, but the autofocus is slow. And when you hit that shutter button and you take a picture, it's exceedingly slow to write it to the card, write the image to the card. And while it's doing that, while it's writing right into the card, you can't do anything else. So it's a really slow camera to use, it has to be said. Also, another potential issue is that there are some of the software out there doesn't support the RAW files, the .x3f files that the Sigmas produce. So that's a bit of a that can be a bit of a downer for some people. Probably an even bigger negative on that camera is the ISO performance, particularly the higher ISO performance. The camera's almost unusable above kind of 400, ISO 400, which nowadays is pretty that's pretty slow. 800, ISO 800 is just out of the question. And it's the reason it gets a bit unusable above 400 is that the noise that's created in the images is a really quite It's not very pleasant at all in colour. Obviously in black and white it's not quite as bad, it looks a bit grainier, so that's not such an issue. But if you're thinking of shooting in colour, I just set the camera to stick basically to the lowest ISO, down around ISO 100 or ISO 50. I mentioned the Sigma Photo Pro, and that software is quite slow to use as well. Not the quickest piece of software when processing images. I think that's got better over the years, but the versions, certainly the early versions, were pretty slow. I don't think there are any other negatives. I liked the camera. It was good. I enjoyed using it. Eventually, the DP1 would become my go-to camera for infrared, and at that time I was doing infrared imaging only with a filter on the front of. You get this little adapter tube you can fit to the front of the camera, so you can put filters and a lens shade and things like that on it, and so you can screw filters into the front of that as well. There endeth part 1 of the 4-part story. That's the first DP1 done and dusted. I still can't believe it died after 1,127 pictures, but there you go. Sorely missed that camera.